The Eastern Province has been the place where a variety of people have settled and called home. For centuries, the nomadic Khoisan people wandered the interior plains.
The original inhabitants of this area, although not permanently settled because they were nomadic people, were the Khoikhoi.
We were here as indigenous people in South Africa before anyone else.
At the same time, the tribal Xhosa people had also settled here and built homesteads and grew their numbers peacefully.
Our forebears enjoyed freedom and civil liberties in this country without foreign obstruction.
In June of 1820, a nation arrived that would change everything for these indigenous people. 5,000 British citizens docked on the shores of what is now Port Elizabeth, with dreams of a better future.
It was a huge recession in Europe, very, very hard conditions in Britain.
And there were riots in England at that time, and there were people that were fearful of their future.
Hundreds of people, men with no work.
So a lot of people were just enchanted with what their lot was in England, and they decided to look elsewhere for home. 300,000 ex-soldiers were unemployed.
It was the largest ever migration of British citizens in the history of the empire.
It wasn't all that difficult, let's say, to put together parties to come out here, although we had no idea of what they were coming to.
The settlers arrived with the hope of an easy integration into a foreign land, but had to adjust to a place that was very different to what they knew.
Just imagine arriving here in Port Elizabeth, coming through the ocean on a long boat from the sailing boat, being dumped on the sand with all your goods, your babies, and then no home. So they would have stayed on the beach in a tent.
These unfavourable conditions meant the settlers had to enforce a different policy to conquer and colonise, as the British nation had once done in India.
With the advent of colonialists, the first thing that they did was to launch an assault.
The British forcibly took land and enforced a new system on the indigenous populations. Any resistance was dealt with expeditiously.
The farms, as they were throughout the Cape in actual fact, are huge, huge pieces of land.
They were given land which contained the ancient caves of our forefathers.
About wars of land dispossession. Those wars of land dispossession were actually instigated by the fact that white people wanted to appropriate, to confiscate the land of the Africans and their resources, that is their own cattle, anything that actually measured their wealth and their ways of living.
They built infrastructures like schools, factories and missions. This development had a social impact on the indigenous inhabitants of the Eastern Cape.
These people came here with a mission to educate people, to introduce education and Christianity.
The organisations, institutions, and so forth that you found here were the sort of things you would find you would probably find in a town somewhere in Great Britain.
As British education, British religion, and a British way of thinking became more entrenched, it meant that the indigenous people were forced to discard much of their own culture and beliefs.
You know, they were sort of introduced, you know, to a Western psychological, you know, orientations, ways of thinking, you know. Do away with your dress, do away with with your African outfit. People were made black Victorians in a sense, you know.
Our human dignity was actually under severe attack.
With the arrival of what I would refer to as Western education, civilization, modernity, you know, just with the introduction of those things, you know, within this Xhosa community. We've lost so many valuable, you know, aspects about our own, you know, lives. In particular, our own culture.
This was the start of a clash between two very different worlds. The Xhosa kingdom took up arms in a desperate attempt to preserve their sovereignty, being the first native army to wield firearms.
You can imagine a nation fighting 9 frontier wars consecutively in 100 years.
Because you must remember that they brought their own machine guns. You must remember that they brought their own, you know, advanced weapons. Our people were displaced systematically.
The Khoisan did not fare well against the might of the British, who were at the time the most powerful empire in the world.
The indigenous Khoi people and the San people had to face the onslaught of people who were so intent in their greed to dispossess our people of land as well as the areas that they occupied. The conquistador knew that whenever you destroy the priesthood of a people, in that way you destroy the people. And the priesthood, who were our leaders and our fathers and our chiefs, they were the first targets, the first people who were killed. People became divorced from their religion and their culture.
People from this area are the first people to go to school, are the first people to be introduced to issues of Christianity, are the first people to go, you know, this, you know, Western purification, you know, to be made modern African intellectuals.
The effect of the British colonial rule was massive. The Xhosa lost the frontier wars and had to accept colonial rule. The non-militant Khoisan now had to face the decimation of their entire tribal system.
The reality for us is that we are marginalized as indigenous people. We want our stake in our country. We want to be just as keen as everyone to really build our nation.
The main thing that they have left behind, of course, are the Khoi names, which are all over. And even here in Port Elizabeth, you know, every day we talk of Kabiga, and we talk of Kukha, and oh gosh, we talk of Addo, and those are all Khoi names.
That culture, the Xhosa culture, or any culture, even if it's a Zulu culture, Shangaan culture, to understand I'm trying to say African culture, it is a cornerstone, a foundation of a family. That is where the family values, community values, societal values, you know, are coming from. Do you understand what I mean? And we are all socialized along those unique values.
Vuyani Boy and Chief Maleba are passionate about the importance culture and heritage play, and have made it their life mission to restore what their people have lost over the last 200 years.
There's a lot of community outreach work that I'm doing that focuses on oral histories, or what I would refer to as living heritage.
I am the chief of the Damasonkwa Khoi.
Vuyani Boy is head of the Oral History Institute at the University of Fort Hare in the Eastern Cape. His job involves collecting and recording stories from the community which have been handed down from generation to generation by word of mouth.
Now I am going to Ntselamanzi community. I am going there to conduct an interview with one of the ex-Robben Islanders, political activist. His name is Thamsanqa Dick. Because first and foremost, you'll have to understand that the elders are just dying out. and they are just leaving absolutely nothing behind in terms of what actually, happened in the past and what it is that they experienced under different living conditions in the country.
Utamkhulu ifani yakhe ayinguNtsimangu, the original surname, but because ebesebenza efama eBedford yabelungu ababethetha isiNgesi, baye bamjika kulafana bambiza uDick uba bengakwazi ukumbiza uNtsimangu.
I'm trying by all means to arrest a fading memory. Bathi abantu abakhulu kwakuhleliwe njani ekuhlaleni ngexesha lapho?
Abantu abakhulu wathi kwakuhleliwe kakuhle konwatyiwe.
I will have to translate the stories into a Xhosa language so that the young people, learners, the Xhosa speaking people from the area may begin to understand, using their own language, the content of these stories and experiences. Talk about the oral history, oral testimonies. You are sort of giving back a kind of integrity. You understand, sort of giving back the dignity which used to be there and is no longer there. And if you go to these communities and begin to interview these people, talk about issues that are very much closer to their hearts, issues that bring certain emotionalities, you can see that it is very much important that these things must be done, because these things are more about a particular past, a particular history, and a particular moment that creates a sense of belonging to someone.
Chief Maleba and his group are fighting to get the Khoikhoi recognized as a legitimate ethnic group. A distinction that's recognized by the UN, but not by the South African Constitution.
Our quest to be accommodated as indigenous, or rather first indigenous people of this country.
This recognition will allow the Khoikhoi a seat in the Eastern Cape House of Traditional Leaders, where they'll be able to have a say in their governance and the land of their ancestors.
Because of this alienation from their roots, each person of Khoikhoi descent is my responsibility.
The need to rediscover ancient rites and traditions is paramount for the Khoi, as their own customs and traditions have been diluted by more dominant and powerful cultures.
What we refer to these days as the colored people, who don't know their Khoisan roots and who need to be brought back to who they were originally, are represented among the people that I stand for and that I fight for, and that we want to restore their dignity, restore their lost culture, their identity, as well as language of our people.
Ubuntu is a word that has its origins in the Eastern Cape. The term means we are all part of the same community. This philosophy is particularly relevant today as the Eastern Cape continues to attract people from places like Ethiopia and Somalia.
My name is Hadis Abdi. I'm from Somalia. Since I come to South Africa, I face many situations. I used to work in locations, and really I can't explain to you now exactly how I pick up myself. And actually now the way I am, I worked very hard.
Some visit, but a lot have stayed, calling it home, much like the settlers of 1820. But in the spirit of reconciliation and acceptance, these immigrants face a better future.
We engage every effort to embrace one another as brothers and sisters.
So, as the Xhosa people and the Khoisan attempt to redress the issues of the past and create a strong culture and heritage once again, the new immigrants of South Africa are integrating their traditions in a more accepting and tolerant South Africa.
Maybe we will see the fruits in my lifetime. Maybe we won't see the fruits in my lifetime. But I know that what I'm working for is not in vain.